What is up, amigos? Today we have the aerodynamics of Serbia, and this comes at the request of one of you amigos, amigo Ethan Duro 4334. And Serbia is pretty cool, so we have it here, and we can see there are a few little peninsulas coming off of it. And probably one of the most interesting traditions that Serbia has is that on the first of every month, all of the men in Serbia, to show their affinity with Ireland, dress up in Irish traditional costumes and walk downhill, while women clap in unison. This has led to the name Green Day for each one of these days, which then led to the band Green Day to adopt this name to show their affinity with Serbians who were showing their affinity with Ireland. So here we have the aerodynamics of Serbia, and the first thing that kind of pops out to me is just how unsteady the wake is. Like, even the very first plane downstream, the wake is already moving around quite a bit, and by the time you get to the second wake, like the second downstream plane, the wake is very unsteady and it breaks down quite a lot. I can tell you that the lift coefficient of Serbia is minus 0.082. So Serbia is actually producing a little bit of downforce overall. The drag coefficient we'll see at the end, and we'll compare it to the other countries that we've done so far. And this is the exact same look, just with the sub-drag plotted. And overall, I can tell that the sub-drag is fairly well distributed, which means that most of Serbia is producing a similar amount of drag overall. You can see like the east side compared to the west side, south and north. They all produce fairly similar colorings in the sub-drag, so it's a fairly uniform country. So now we have a wide plane going straight through the middle of Serbia, and with this you can see what I was talking about with the lift coefficient. You can see on the bottom part, the south part of Serbia, the wake is a little bit bigger, and that means that the flow is sort of going down a bit of an angle compared to the top part. So that's why we're getting this lift being produced. Overall, there's quite a lot of unsteadiness. You can see there's a lot of wake being shed on either side, and that is because this is a bluff body. And this plane shows the sub-drag, the total drag, and again, it's fairly well uniformly distributed. Interestingly, the top part, the wake coming off of the top seems to be blowing out a little bit more than the bottom, if you look at those edges there, but overall the amount of orangeness is the same throughout the wake there. So now we have this exact same plane, but we're looking at the profile drag. So before we looked at the total drag, now this is the pressure drag and the skin friction drag together. And we can see that the scale on the right there, it goes up to 1 in the profile drag coefficient. And interestingly, if you look at periodically the edges of this wake, you can see these little roll-ups of red. Those are vortices that are being shed, but because they are such low pressure, that contributes also to the pressure drag as well, which is the profile drag. So now we have another Y plane, but it's moving over towards the west of Serbia a little bit more. And this is interesting because we can see in this situation, the Serbia is producing significantly more lift in this plane. So you can see that the wake comes down a lot more underneath compared to over the top. So I would say that the west side of Serbia is producing more lift than the middle part at least. And with that wake comes a lot of drag. So you can see underneath, the drag is much greater down there than over the top. So if we were to like maybe take up a bit more land and smooth out that southern border on the west there, or maybe cut it a little bit straighter, then the flow would probably be a little bit more streamlined, and we wouldn't get nearly as much drag being formed on this little part here. So now we have a Z plane going midway through Serbia, so it's just south of the capital. We'll look at the capital in a second. But right now, we can see that the wake is really wide, like it blows out a lot as you'd expect. Also at the front of Serbia, you can see that there's the deceleration zone. That's because the velocity drops because the streamlines hit the country and then they have to move around, and there's a stagnation point there. In terms of the recirculation zone, I would say behind Serbia, it extends probably 2 Serbia lengths downstream, and then the flow starts to straighten up from there. So now we have this exact same plane, but with a subtotal drag, and generally speaking, the sub-drag is fairly well uniformly distributed, but there are these little highs that we see from these vortices being shed from the edges. And you can see that by those little red highs that circle off and they spin around and then they go downstream and get torn apart. So now this plane is just around where Belgrade is and in the Z plane. And one thing that's a little bit troubling is if you look on the east side of Serbia, so the bit closest to us, you see this little bit of land jutting out. Now, while that is more land for the country, that does increase the drag and the wake because you have this little bit sticking out that just creates a lot more wake, and then there's like this little divot between that peninsula and the rest of mainland Serbia, and that's going to waste. So what I would do is ideally smoothen that out or chamfer it to make it a little bit more streamlined, because now we have such a big wake from this east side for no real reason. And now we have that exact same plane with the total drag again. And once again, the total drag mimics quite closely the wake in this case, because a lot of the wake is from the pressure drag. You have a high pressure upstream and a low pressure downstream that creates a lot more drag, the resistive force for this country. So I wonder what the drag coefficient of this is. Drum roll, please. Wow, so the drag coefficient of Serbia is 1.16, which is just a little bit lower than Bosnia and Herzegovina, and quite a bit more than Germany. And that's probably partly due to that peninsula that I mentioned earlier, where you have that little bit jutting out, and that's creating a lot more wake than what we really need to. So if you wanted to reduce this drag coefficient by a little bit, maybe a few percent, just chamfer that bit off and or fill in that section. So that's it in this video. Make sure to like, subscribe if you liked it, and if you want to see more videos like this. And if you want to see other videos like this, check out our country playlist for the drag coefficient and aerodynamics. And if you want to get better at CFD and or theory yourself, check out the courses that we offer in the link in the description. And I'll see you next video. Peace and amigos.